the #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.
Good morning, guys, and welcome to episode 236 of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments with me, your host, Richard Bexon. Today, we're going to be talking with Sonia Aragon. She's a partner at Quatro Legal in Costa Rica, mainly in Guanacaste. Today, we're going to be talking to her all about water and especially Guanacaste, as this is a bit of a hot topic at the moment. For anyone that's up there in Guanacaste or looking to invest, it should be something that's always on your radar and something you should be talking about. Sometimes, even though you may have a water letter, the area may have water issues, and you need to kind of really think about that when designing a home or buying a home and taking a look at water storage tank in the area as well. We're actually doing some pretty interesting stuff here, kind of on a sustainable front with the rain capture on a project up in Arenal, a personal project here. So that one's going to be interesting to see. It'll be our first project doing that. But water really is key here in Costa Rica. Again, Costa Rica has tons of water. It's just its water infrastructure needs improving, put it that way. I'll say it nicely that way. But anyway, guys, if you're looking to do anything here in Costa Rica, please don't hesitate to contact us. Honestly, even if it's with a chat, there's no obligation. We don't like people basically getting burned in Costa Rica. And if you just want to get 20 years of experience kind of within 15 or 30 minutes with us, just email us info@investing@costarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. You're never wasting our time. Whether it's like, where should I invest? What should I invest into? Where should I buy? What should I know? Building, land, all the things, that you should be aware of. We're just I say we're suckers to help people. And so feel free to reach out to us and chat with us. There's also a link down in the description down below that you can use basically to organize a time to chat with one of the guys here in the office. Or again, you can email us info@investingcostarica.com. But let's get straight into the podcast with Sonia. Good morning, Sonia. How are you doing?
Hi, Richard. All good. How about you?
Very, very good. Really appreciate you taking your time to come here on the podcast and kind of share some of your knowledge and the information that you have, especially on Guanacaste.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, Sonia, the first question I love to ask people is just to get an idea of kind of what you're seeing happening in the market, because a lot of people don't have that perspective that are listening to this podcast. And I mean, a lot of volatility at the moment. And I don't think that volatility, in Western world, and I would mainly say North America, is going to change anytime soon. But I mean, what are you seeing happening here in Costa Rica and how is that impacting that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the situation with Costa Rica, because I feel that no matter how the market shifts, I feel that people are still interested in relocating or investing in the country. I think Costa Rica has done a really good job in showcasing to the world what is it that we can offer. That it's not only our biodiversity or our nature, but also the quality of life here. I think it's the political stability, the warmth of the people, and just the overall lifestyle. And also, I've noticed in the last 5 years, especially in Western markets, that there's even more interest in Costa Rica. And I feel it has to do with the benefits that the country offers. So, we have direct flights from major cities. We have local regulation that is attracting foreigner investors. And also, I think it's the overall appeal of living or investing in a growing, environmentally conscious country.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, when you take a look at your volume of work, I mean, let's take January 2025 versus January 2024. Have things slowed down a little bit, the number of transactions? I mean, and like, what are you just generally seeing happening in the market?
I think last year it was a little bit slower, but because I think people were waiting for the results of the US elections, that
Yep.
it definitely has an impact in Costa Rica, regardless of, what happened. And I think after the elections, you could feel now, peak starting to rise, again, reactivating transactions. And I feel, at least in our case, January it's packed with transactions, and we do get a lot of leads and people that are questioning or considering relocating or investing in the country. So I think this year I feel it more positive maybe than last year, even though last year was a good year. But I did feel the difference from other years.
You're the first person that I've spoken to, Sonia, that's actually like got I would say, and not that they don't have an optimistic look, but the people that are saying that, like, look, I expected like business to drop this year. But yeah, it's again, that's the great thing about this podcast of getting people's perspectives. And again, you're at the front there, meaning seeing the number of transactions. I'm like, look, I spend a lot of time chatting with architects and construction, guys in construction. The architects are like, yeah, things are slowing down, and the construction guys don't know it yet, if that makes sense, because they haven't seen that. Like, there was that pause last year, and they haven't seen that pause. You guys are at the front. The realtors, the lawyers are at the front, seeing the transactions that are then going to have that waterfall effect down.
Yeah. I feel like this year it's starting solid. I can see it with the amount of transactions, but also the amount of people that are reaching out to us through our website or WhatsApp, just asking. And I think that's the first step, right? And at least in our firm, we have a policy of, giving the information for free. I understand it's not easy to make that decision. So they need to have all the tools and all the information. And I do see people reaching out and trying to get that information. Whether they're going to make it or not, that's a different story, right? But at least you can see that there's interest.
Well, I mean, look, I look at tourism data and, rental data of like January from demand perspective was actually down, and we still don't have the ICT arrival numbers yet. And I think that the reason for that is they're a lot lower than they're expecting. So they're trying to polish them or do something with them. I expect the numbers to be, 8 to 10% lower for January this year than it was last year. The demand in tourism in January, just again with friends, etc., the demand is down a little bit, but February is up. Like February is a lot, it's very interesting how we're seeing, again, this volatility. And I think that that's probably here to stay.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, definitely. Sonia, the real thing, I suppose, the meat of this podcast is really just talk about water, because I think it's, something that a lot of people don't really think about when they buy a house, around, in the rest of the world, but like it's something they should be in Costa Rica. And as I explained to people, I'm like, Costa Rica has tons of water, like insane amounts of water. Problem is, we just don't have the infrastructure to capture that water and deliver it where it needs to get to.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, what should people understand about water in Costa Rica?
I think people need to understand that water management in Costa Rica, it's complex. And especially in rural areas. And I agree with you, there is water, but how it's managed, it's the tricky part of it. And also right now, and I would say in many locations in the country, we are facing challenges with water and water scarcity. And I think the challenge of this is that the problem can't be pinned down to a single cause or party. And I have a hard time when I hear, colleagues or clients, or even, the formal position of the AIA or the ASAA stating that they cannot give water because X or Y failed to do something, and I think it's a lot more complex than that. Because in my experience, water scarcity is the result of many factors in which, for sure, you have there maybe the AIA or the ASAA not doing what they should supposed to do, but it's not only that. And I think to truly understand the complexity of how water is managed in Costa Rica, we need to go back a little bit of, history without getting too technical. But we have AIA, right? And AIA is the main entity in charge of providing and granting drinkable water to the country. And back in the 60s, they were not able to do so in rural areas. So they created the ASAAs, and the ASAA are this nonprofit organization that it's composed of local neighbors. And it made sense. Like the AIA delegate part of their faculties or their responsibilities to the ASAAs. So this local neighbors will be in charge of providing and granting water to their community. And that structure, it worked for decades, right? And I think it's, the ASAAs back in the days, it was relatively limited what they did. They would grant water letters to single family homes, small business, nothing too complex. But I think we can all agree that those days are gone, or they have changed drastically, and the demand of water has skyrocketed. The level of complexity that you have now in rural areas, or in many of them, are very different from how it was 20 or 30 years ago. Now you have multifamily house, you have high-end developments, you have real estate projects. So I think neither the ASAAs in most cases or AIA was ready for it. And I think that's the result of what we're living right now. So I think it's kind of like a catch-22, because I feel like AIA, part of the responsibility is to train the ASAAs and give them all the tools that they need so they can face this new demand from a technical and legal perspective. And I feel that sometimes the AIA fails to do that. And then you have the ASAAs, on the other hand, which in in the majority of cases or in general, I don't think they're really taking this seriously, and also them trying to get trained. Like I've met with some asadas and I was impressed. Like they don't even know the regulations that they have and that they can use, right? So I think it's this complex relationship between how asadas operate and how they have been operating, and how how they're involved in this new market, maybe without the tools and knowledge that they need to. And the fact that I think that IA should be more involved. And on top of all that, you need to add the environmental issue, right? And at least here where I'm based, close to Tamarindo, most of the water is captured from the same source, which is the aquifer, regardless if you're getting water from AIA or from ASAA or even having a well. The majority of times you're capturing from the same aquifer. And obviously, if there's a lot of people capturing water from the same aquifer and we're not giving the opportunity for the aquifer to recharge naturally, there's a risk, right?
Yeah.
That we can have it collapse or even get salinized because how close it is to the ocean. And lastly, I would add, and this one saddens me deeply, because you also have owners that are not acting responsibly. So you have owners filling out a pool from the water meter, or owners that they are here in Guanacaste and they're expecting to have this, garden, very, green garden, consuming a lot of water when you are in one of the driest parts of the country, right? So I think it's like all these elements and factors that makes it very, very complex.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Look, the beauty of Costa Rica is its growth has been somewhat organic and not steroided. Like and again, we saw it in like 07, 08 of where we saw this huge amount of development and we saw it slow down. And then the asadas and the AIA had to kind of catch up, if that made sense, And again,
Exactly.
with that
Mm-hmm.
huge charge, the problem is I don't think we're seeing that pause in order for everything to catch up. It continues.
Mm-hmm.
So the distance continues to grow. But also it's just that the money required a lot of the time for these asadas to put in this infrastructure, of course, has to come from private means, because the asadas, like, they're not making lots of money. I mean, a water in Costa Rica is not that expensive comparatively to other places in the world. So, if like, I think my water bill, well, and I'm in the city, is like $4 a month. And I'm like, how does an asada with $4 a month coming in able to maintain all of the piping and everything, or go, we need more water, I need to drill more wells, or I need to do all the studies that are necessary to drill the wells, to put the infrastructure in place and go through all the bureaucracy, necessary in order to get it approved. Like, it's kind of, as you said there, a catch-22 situation, a lot of these circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
It's either that or you just start going, no, you can have a water letter, but your meter is going to cost you $2,000 to put in, so that as a donation.
And I think that's part of it. For example, there's actually 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting in one of the asadas, and they were saying, like, there's a lot of people that had authorization to build a single family house, and they somehow managed to create a hotel or a multifamily house. So obviously their consumption is a lot higher. But the regulation entitles the asadas to cut that water meter. There's other mechanisms that the asadas can do to control how water is being managed. And I think that's where, I don't know if it's from ASA or ARIA or where it should come, but that's where knowledge is important, so they can also take control of the situation.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of, not only seeing how, because usually I think asadas are like trying to get more water and trying to capture more water, but that's part of it. But you also need to control the water that it's being granted and how it's being managed as of right now. So yeah, again, I think the result is it's a complex situation for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and you have people in the asadas that like aren't from a technical background either. It's as you said, it's kind of community run.
And that's why I mentioned before, like in the 60s, it made sense. Like, the level of complexity and how many water letters people needed, it was very reasonable. So it was fine. And it made sense that local neighbors were the ones in charge of managing the water of their own community. But now, that's where it gets tricky. Yeah, definitely.
What are the areas of Costa Rica that you know of that are most affected by water at the moment?
I would say especially rural areas, towns where there's a lot of, impact on real estate and development, because I think that's where it kind of like you see the combination of all the factors that I just mentioned before. You have, usually these areas are managed by asadas, they're close to the ocean. So, you have the risk of the aquifer getting salinized. And also you have the fact that there's a lot of development or people are, high demand of water letters. So I think right now the issue is bigger in rural areas where there's a lot of, development or tourism.
You're in Guanacaste. When you have a client that's
Mhm.
buying a property in a certain beach town, when is it that you're like, I need to make sure that the water letter is like, everything is tight and that everything is good? What are those towns that normally for you, Sonia, are like, I just need to make 100% sure?
I think everywhere right now in
Yeah.
Guanacaste. I don't think you can take it from granted. And also it changes from time to time. So towns that you know that they're granting water, just one day they stop granting water because the aquifer or it's compromised or they don't have enough water flow, or maybe they receive a notice from AYA that they need to stop granting water letters. So I think I never take that for granted. I think water is key. I also encourage real estate agents. We did some training sessions on water last year. And I also think when you are listing a property and a vacant property, to encourage the owner and make sure that you already have a water availability letter before you enter into the market,
Yep.
unless you disclose that right at the beginning. So, there are buyers that are interested in purchasing a land with no water and just, wait for the right time when there is water and then develop it or sell it. Maybe they don't want to develop right away, so there's also value in that. But I think when it comes to water, especially in this area, it's key to make sure that there is water right at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I actually I bought a lot that doesn't have water at the moment up in Arenal. And again, Arenal has tons of water. It's just that the source of the water is inside the national park and the Asada and whatever. So I mean, we're doing rain capture, Sonia. It rains so much in
Hmm.
Arenal. And it's kind of something, I get to play, I say get to learn and play around with certain sustainable ways of doing things here in Costa Rica. So it's going to be
Yeah.
an interesting one. Guanacaste maybe not so easy with rain, with rain capture.
Hmm.
But definitely in places like, the Highland mountain areas, definitely it is.
Yeah. It's called, I think, rain harvesting. And I also checked that it's regulated like recently, I think in the
Yeah,
last
just
2 years,
yeah, exactly. We just did
2 to 3 years.
project in San Gerardo Lota using rain capture.
Hmm.
So what questions, a lot of people are looking to buy land, rather than, well, sometimes maybe an existing home, but like what questions should they be asking about water to their realtor or to the owner?
I think if it's a vacant lot, they need to ask if the property has a water letter, but there's different type of water letters. So specifically the water availability letter, which is the letter that confirms that the ASA or the AYA, depending on the agency in charge in that particular area, is able to provide water and that has the infrastructure to provide water all the way to the property. So, and this is in a scenario where the buyer again wants to develop right away because there's also value in purchasing property with no water, right? But if the intention is to develop the land, then you want to make sure that it has water availability letter to confirm what I just mentioned, and also understanding the scope of this water because the DSA or the IA is going to let you know how much water flow they can allocate on a monthly basis and the nature of the water letter. So if it's a single family house or a multifamily house or if it's for a hotel. So that also needs to be aligned with the intentions of the buyer just to make sure that they can develop whatever they're thinking, they want to do.
Yeah, because I've seen water letters where, again, I'm going to use Playa Grande just because we've had a lot of experience there, where it's like, no, there is tubing out the front of your property, and that's all it says. It's not you
Yeah,
can't use it for construction, like it's not a water availability. Well, yeah, I mean it's not a formal water availability letter, if that makes sense. And sometimes you
yeah,
might
no,
show that, but that paper is not worth what it's written on. That's just saying there's tubing in front of you. That doesn't mean you can connect.
exactly. Exactly. I think that's the worst water letter of all. It's like there's a tube, but there's no flow.
I don't know why they
So
have it
thanks.
though. Like, why should you? They should be banned from giving that because it's nothing. Like it, all it
Yeah.
does is gives like it tricks people, if that makes sense, into thinking that they have water availability when they don't.
Yeah. And I agree. And I feel sometimes the letters are not that easy to understand.
Correct.
And also the regulation is very clear on the names of the water letters, but sometimes as they get too creative and it's like, you need to read like 5 times the letter so you can truly understand what is it that they're certifying.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, you're looking for NOI or CI, if that makes sense. And
exactly.
it's literally that
Exactly.
word that you're just looking for, you know.
Uh-huh.
And there's all
I
this
agree.
text. So anyway, I mean, what are the ways to get legal water? I mean, we've talked about AIA, we've talked about ASADA. What other options are available to people?
I think in summary, there are two ways. You can have a water connection either from Aya or Asa, which is what we just talked about, or you can capture privately water from public domains. So from a legal perspective, rivers, oceans, the groundwater is considered of public domain, meaning it belongs to the state. So you can capture it for private usage through a concession or by getting an authorization from the entity in charge. So in this scenario, we're not dealing with Aya or Asala. When we're talking about capturing water from the underground, usually is by means of a well. And here we're dealing with the water department or the Dirección de Aguas in Spanish. So that's a different entity. And it's another way of capturing water. But again, it's a little bit different. It's also obviously regulated. I do get a lot of clients sometimes that come here and it's like, oh, water, it's not an issue. There's a creek crossing, in my property. And so I'll capture water there. It's like, no, it's not that easy because that's public domain, right? So you do need to have an authorization from the agency in charge so you can privately use this water. So wells it's an option. It's very regulated. But yeah, it's another way of capturing water.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done hand dug wells, artisanal wells, perforated wells, concessions on creeks, concessions on river, there. The
Mhm.
one thing I haven't done, which is kind of interesting, we did get a little bit involved in the desalination plant at Panilla a little bit.
Yeah,
But that's an expensive way to have water.
it's interesting because I had a meeting 3 weeks ago with one company, well known. There isn't too many companies, but well, this company is well known and it gives that service to a high end development. And I was fascinated by it. I think it's so interesting. I still don't know how that looks from an environmental perspective. Like capturing all that water and then bringing back the salt.
Yeah.
That's not my field, but yeah, it was interesting, but it sounded very expensive because it's the machine, the energy, you need to
Yeah.
have a backup plan. So yeah.
I mean, it's a couple of million just for the machine, and then the maintenance. I mean, it's I've actually got to go to Reserva Conchal, the FIFCO buddy there actually runs it always. Like, Rich, anytime you want to come and see it, let me know and I'll show it. Like, he's like, we've got it humming now, but they only use it kind of
Yeah.
during the dry season, really. So yeah, but I think it's probably the way that I would say larger developments in the coast are going to have to go because
Mhm.
I don't see another option at the moment.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with a client, and he was mentioning that there's a company in the US that they are giving the service or capturing water from vapor in
Yep.
the atmosphere.
Yep.
So yeah, I think,
I
there's
suppose my
this.
only question on that is during dry season, how useful is that going to be in Costa Rica with humidity and stuff? But again, I don't know how humid it gets during dry season, but
And I don't know the level of humidity that you need for that to work
yep.
because even in dry season, like look at my hair, there's always humidity. So
I know,
yeah,
but a lot of people come to Costa Rica and they love how their hair is here.
not
Like,
me.
no, oh, okay. Um, how does the government, you mentioned there a little bit more about private wells there. I mean, how does the government regulate those private wells, Sonia?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it actually changed in 2022 because we have two type of wells. We have the artisan well and we have the drilling concession well. And before 2022, both of them require prior authorization from the water department. But in 2022, the water department, based on an interpretation that they did on the law, they are not longer regulating or requiring prior authorization for artisan wells. So when it comes to artisan wells, you don't need prior authorization. But artisan wells, again, a little bit of context, like the water regulation, the main one, it's from the 40s. And artisan wells was more oriented to, local farmers and for small scale agricultural activities. Although the artisan well is still regulated, I don't think it's a reliable source of water, if that makes sense, at least for thinking about building a single family house or using it as the only source of water. I did some research, and there's some municipalities that they are authorizing the usage of artisan well as the source of water to apply for building permits.
Yep.
I haven't heard as of right now somebody getting a building permit, but I do know, and we actually got like the written confirmation from some municipalities accepting it as a source of water. My feeling with artisan wells is because it's not regulated. I don't know how I feel about that, when it comes to setbacks, or how do you have control that your other neighbor is not going to put like the water
Sure.
treatment plant next to your artisan well where you're going to capture all the water, right? And how do you make sure that it's a reliable source of water within the whole year? So I think it's there in the regulation, and now maybe it's easier because you don't need the authorization. And if you use it for a single family house and to irrigate half an hectare, it works for the municipality. But I just don't know if in reality it's a a reliable source or a useful source for the depending on what you want to use it. But for to build a house here in Playa Grande, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a possible solution.
Well, look, I mean, I think it's just I'll let you know. But I've done it in other projects around the country, and what we use again is that you have to give, as you said there, you have to give the well time to kind of refill itself. So we always have these holding tanks, and we're constantly taking small amounts of water, and especially different times of the year, of course, you can use that. I think it's very difficult in Guanacaste, Sonia, to do it just because, again, it gets very dry. I think there are other areas done stuff up in San Carlos area, but again, a lot of rain, but I do agree on the septic tanks, because we're always like, where are we going to put this that if the neighbor puts a septic tank system in, we have sufficient, setback? Because I think
Exactly.
it should be 40 meters, but I think it needs to be way beyond that, to be honest with you.
So now if we're talking about 40 meters, it's most likely it's useful for a very big land, right? If you start to
Correct.
working on the setbacks. So yeah,
Correct.
I would say 40 meters, it could be an option. But again, like it's there. I don't
Yeah,
know if it's just like what's gonna create, like I feel people are like, okay, this is the solution, artisan wells.
it's not.
I don't know.
It's
I
not.
don't think it is.
I can tell you I've dug one up in La Fortuna and it was dry. Like we went down
Hmm
10 meters and it was just sand. And he was like, "You want me to keep going?" And I'm like, "No." Like, I mean, I don't, yeah. And I've drilled a bunch of wells and not hit water either. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's so complicated.
hmm
There is
Yeah.
no guarantee. If somebody says to you, "I can guarantee I'm get you water," they're lying to you.
I agree. Yeah, yeah.
You
And then
know.
you have the other one, which is the concession well, and that one is heavily regulated. So you
Yep.
do need, without getting too technical, you need like two authorizations from the water department, one for drilling, and then the other one once you have filed all the studies that demonstrates, how the well is behaving and how it's capturing water. Then, if everything goes well, they will give you the authorization so you can actually capture the water, and they will let you know how much water you can capture per month. So that one is more heavily regulated. Obviously, it's more safe, I would say, if you get all the permits. It's definitely used, especially for bigger projects or developments. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Those are the two options right now when it comes to capturing water, underground water.
Yeah. Sonia, is there a question that you typically get asked that maybe I haven't asked you in this podcast yet?
I do get a lot if it's unconstitutional or a violation for to owners not getting water letters. And the short answer, it is not. If it's based on technical reasons or environmental reasons why, the denial is happening, which usually is what's going on here. So, yeah, I do get a lot of people that are upset, and I understand. And yeah, there's a constitutional right of having access to water. But if the reasons why you are not getting water is because the ASA or the IA or even the water department is rejecting the drilling of the well because of environmental issues, then it's a valid reason.
Yeah,
It's not
definitely.
a violation to this, right? Yeah.
Well, awesome. Sonia, my last question for you is I've kept you long enough, and the one that I think a lot of people love to hear. If you inherited $500,000 and you had to invest it into a business or, into real estate in Costa Rica, what would you invest it into? Where would it be and why?
Right now, after getting very involved with water, I would say in a business that offers alternative solutions for fresh drinking water. I think it's a great business opportunity. I think it's a way of really making a difference. And I think it's very interesting. Like we just talk about, vapor in the atmosphere, salinization plants. Like I think there's other ways around it that regardless of what's going on, there's an opportunity to, just have an alternative option than capturing water from the nature and the creeks and the aquifer.
I mean, I agree. I think a business doing like, again, alternative water sources could do very, very well here. It's going to
Mhm.
take, I mean, you better be very tenacious and patient because if you're going to be taking water vapor, you're going to have to educate, if you know what I mean, especially
Yep.
municipalities. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
had to educate municipalities on rain capture of like, oh no, it is approved. This is how you do it. This is what you need. And then like once they get it, they're like, oh, okay, that's fantastic. But to be the first person to do it, like, yeah, you're going to
Mhm.
take some arrows.
Yep. I agree. It will be challenging, but I think it could be worth it.
I agree. I agree. Well, Sonia, I very much appreciate your time and kind of sharing your knowledge coming here on the podcast. Anyone that wants to reach out to Sonia, you can. All of her contact details are in the description, but very much appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Bye. Guys, great podcast there with Sonia just on water. And again, I mean, I think what she said there is all of Guanacaste kind of has water issues at the moment. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just you just got to have the right advice when investing here. And, I mean, a lot of people that are selling you properties are going to tell you that it's going to be no issue. But I think you really need to speak to someone. And again, you can reach out to Sonia, you can reach out to us, and we'll just give you kind of the lowdown of what's happening in these areas on water. Because again, we're the ones actually kind of developing in these areas as well. I say developing, but it's not that big development. But like building in these areas and helping people kind of invest, so have a very clear picture of kind of what's happening, especially in areas like Potrero and Flamingo and Guanacaste and Tamarindo and Avianas and all those areas. So yeah. And again, if you want to ask Sonia any questions, she's a huge resource. I love, there are some great lawyers up there in Guanacaste. She's one of them. So you can reach out to her. All of her contact details are in the description down below. And if you want to reach out to us, guys, as I mentioned, everything's in the description down below, or you can email us info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. Anything you need, just let us know. We're a sucker for helping people, as I like to say. But again, if you've enjoyed this podcast, guys, please subscribe, share it. Also give us a 5-star review. I love to read the reviews online. I think it's only on Apple that you can give reviews. If you're listening to this on YouTube as well, a comment, very much appreciate it, guys. But we'll, again, continue to get these out every single week. We've got some interesting ones coming up, and just trying to give you guys an idea of kind of what's really happening out there in the market. I think it is turning to a buyer's market. And I think there's a lot of opportunity when that happens, for anyone. I always invest based on cash flow and kind of the money is made on the way in, rather than the speculation in the future of what something could be worth. But again, that's just my investment philosophy. It's not the same for everyone. But if you want to talk to me, again, I get all these emails, guys. So info@investingcostarica.com. If I'm available, I'll chat with you. If not, I'll have Jake or Anna in my office speak to you. Again, they have a bunch of experience as well. But again, very much appreciate your time and also the support for the podcast, and have a great day. Bye.
The #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.